everyone's looking around and seeing what a gorgeous room the gym turned into. Wow. So good afternoon and welcome to all of you here today and everyone at home in Zoom land. It's exciting to see so many people interested in the Oral History Project. My name is Connie Gibb, and I was in the Radcliffe class of 1966 and am an interviewer with the Radcliffe College Alumni Oral History Project. I assume many of you are also Radcliffe alumni, and in fact, I'm hoping there are a lot of you out there who have already been interviewed for the project. So I'm honored to be here to welcome and introduce Alice Abarbanel, also of the class of 1966, the woman who was inspired to create this project after talking to an alumna from the 1940s at the Radcliffe Club of San Francisco. She understood that documenting the lives of these women while they were at Radcliffe would create a valuable resource. So through her constant work, interviewing, fundraising, coordinating with the Schlesinger Library and transcribers, and keeping track of all the other administrative details, all while she was working full-time, she has made this project happen, and I am in awe of what she's accomplished. Yay, Alice. So, I got involved in the project because I noticed Alice's announcement in a Harvard magazine in early 2020. I offered my services, and this has led to two wonderful results. First, I've had the pleasure of interviewing many extraordinary alumni, some of whom are here today. From my experience, I can attest that although Radcliffe was not perfect, the admissions committee was really good. Second, Alice has become a treasured friend, despite the fact that we live on opposite coasts, so how lucky am I? So it's with great pride that I introduce Alice Abarbanel, the director and driving force behind the Radcliffe College Alumni Oral History Project. It's an amazing project, and she has done an amazing job. And I am in awe of the wonderful Alice Abarbanel.
Microphone. How's that? How's that? Better. Okay. Hello, Radcliffe. We are home. Together in Radcliffe Yard, here in our gym, in our gymnasium. So where's the swimming pool? Has the swimming pool disappeared? A mystery. Well, I am here to tell you we are not disappearing. We are here, we are speaking, we are writing, we are recording our lived experience of undergraduate life at Radcliffe, our stories. And today we are celebrating the Radcliffe College Alumni Oral History Project, honoring all the volunteers, our supporters, participants, and all Radcliffe alumni. Our oral and written history interviews are and will be living in the Radcliffe College archives at the Arthur and Elizabeth Schlesinger Library on the history of women in America. We are supported by the expertise of Schlesinger librarians Jenny Gottwals, Sarah Hutchin, and archivist Kat Holbrook, and I'm asking you to please to stand, Jenny and Sarah. Yay. Thank you. And the mystery of the swimming pool, we all know one just has to ask the librarians. I asked, mystery solved. Next slide. The pool is first. This photo, thank you, Jenny, is from 1965. Lee Eiler, class of 1966, a friend from Comstock Hall, tells me it is a Radcliffe College inter-house swimming meet. Lee was on that swim team. She wasn't sure if it was that year, but that's one of the swimming meets. And some of you may see in the big thing, there's some men back there. They were the timers, I'm told. The next slide is the pool vault. The pool has been converted into a climate-controlled vault that houses many historic documents. The librarians tell me they call it the pool vault. Jenny tells us the vault still has some of the original marble salvaged from the swimming pool. I don't think that's marble. I think that was the side of the swimming pool. I don't know, the tile. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to do some introductions and thank yous. Let's begin by acknowledging the Radcliffe alumni present today in person and on Zoom. Please I'm going to ask you to stand by decades or raise your hand when I call out the decade. And remain standing, please, or your hands up until the end. And then we can clap. So here we go. Any alumni from the 40s here? We have a son of someone from the 40s, I know that. How about the 50s? All right. Okay, the 60s, stay standing. I want to see how many of you are right. The 70s, please. Now, 1979, who are here for their 45th, was the last class admitted by a separate Radcliffe admissions committee. And we hope to finish the project with the class of 79. And this week, I was at meetings, and I want to say I was reminded by some women who are probably here from the 80s and 90s that they too are Radcliffe. So all alumni from the 80s and 90s, please join us. All right. Okay, here we are. Look around. We're great, okay? And now I would like Susie, stay standing, please. Hi, I want to introduce Susie Underwood, who's going to be presenting with me today, class of 1972. Yay. Susie. We have been asked to tell some stories for our celebration. Susie is the project assistant director, and along with being an interviewer among many tasks we share, Susie has brought the 70s to the project and revised our questionnaire to match the historical moment. And let me say one more thing about Susie, no sitting yet. A special Susie contribution. She was a Radcliffe Choral Society member and continues that talent in the presentation and celebration. Every chorus you will hear today, there will be 3 of them, has Susie as a member. Okay. Okay, now here today are only some of our dedicated interviewers who are all alumni and volunteers. Please stand, all you beautiful interviewers. There are too many to name individually, interviewers, but I want you to know our project has been cross-generational from the very beginning in 2020. As of today, our oldest interviewer is from the class of 1960, while our youngest interviewers today, and 3 of the 4 of them are here, are from the classes of 2016 and 17. They have been interviewing alumni who graduated 45 to 50 years before them. I am deeply grateful to all the women who are interviewing and to all the connections we are making. 2 more special thank yous. Dee Cunell from the class of 1975, one of our transcribers who has been with us from the start. And And Julie Cheever from the class of 1966, our editor and a member of the original project planning committee from the Radcliffe Club of San Francisco, the only separate Radcliffe club left in the world. Thank you to our sponsor, the Radcliffe Club of San Francisco, and a shout out to Kathy Henschel, class of 70, who can't be here, and to the Crimson Society for inviting us to present a Zoom each year for the past several years. Thank you, Ann Porter, and thank you, where are you, Bob? Anyway, Bob, there you are. Winnie's husband, Bob. Winnie Blacklow's husband, Bob. We also extend our deep gratitude to the Radcliffe Institute for welcoming us to this beautiful space, providing staff and tech support, and arranging our party. And now just a word about the Harvard Alumni Association. The HAA staff have been essential this year in the past few years in supporting and staffing our presentations. Special thanks to Heather Gain and Mariah Bensley for their dedication and hard work. And you're still working somewhere. I can't see you. There's Mariah. Yeah. The Harvard, and to William Lemos for outreach, and to Abby Hutton for her loyal support since the beginning. The Harvard Alumni Association Executive Director, Sarah Carmone, has kindly agreed to speak. At the beginning of her tenure last year, as the first woman executive director of the HAA, Sarah reached out to me. We met in Berkeley, where I live. Her first question to me was, what can the HAA do for the Oral History Project? That still brings tears to my eyes. I almost fainted. She had to pick me off the floor. Our lively conversation that day, coupled with the HAA's ongoing interest and support, has affirmed that our project and all Radcliffe alumni are genuinely valued by the HAA. Now to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Alice. I'm going to move this water so I don't spill it on the computer. Thank you so much, Alice. As Alice said, I'm Sarah Carmone. I'm the Executive Director of the Harvard Alumni Association and proudly the first woman to hold this role. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today, and the Radcliffe Oral History Project is very important to me and dear to my heart, so I'm thrilled to be here to celebrate it with all of you. And while I didn't go to Radcliffe, as a fellow Seven Sister alumna, having attended Vassar, I feel a special connection to this project. Understanding the stories and experiences of women who came before me was foundational to my college experience. As a student, I worked in our Alumnae, still called Alumnae, house on campus, and spent many hours in the basement of Alumnae House in our file room. And part of my job as a student worker was to capture articles and stories and things about Vassar graduates and file them away. And I did so much more than that. I spent so much time reading them and hearing the stories of the women, mostly women who came before me. And it was so important to my experience there, and is one of the reasons why I feel a special connection to this project and understand how important it is. So I'm thrilled that this project now makes that same experience I had possible for Radcliffe and Harvard women and men and so many others, and will benefit generations to come. The project is a wonderful grassroots example of alumnae dreaming of a great idea, working together to see it through to fruition. And the HAA exists not just to connect alumni and alumnae to the university, but also to each other. And it gives me tremendous amount of pride to see this kind of engagement happening organically, and importantly, to be able to support it. The physical output of this project, the stories, is something that didn't exist previously. You're capturing the voices of our alumnae over time and creating something that will inspire generations to come. You are capturing not only the unique stories of individuals, but also the legacies of generations of women who have come through this institution. And for that, I and all of us are grateful. I want to take just a minute to acknowledge Alice. This is her brainchild, and it is with thanks to her vision and her commitment, her dedication that this project has achieved so much success. I also want to thank the participants, more than 230 alumni who have contributed their stories. And I'm thrilled that that number continues to grow thanks to the many classes who are eager to be involved, including, as Alice mentioned, the Radcliffe class of 1979, which is kicking off their project this year. And of course, to the interviewers and to the Schlesinger Library team, the Radcliffe Institute, Dean Brown-Nagin for their engagement and support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Alice.
And before Susie and I begin, I'll be starting. I want to let you know that we are grateful to Patrina Jackson, the executive director of the Schlesinger Library. She will be joining us at the end to say a few words. Okay, next slide, please. So, with quotes, audio clips, and a flash mob song, Susie and I will cover the themes listed below. We will move through the decades and give you a few highlights from over 200 interviews. I don't really need to read them. I think we all can read, but I'll just say I'm gonna focus more on the 40s, on separate joint academics and extracurricular activities. We have some stories about Widener and Lamont, diversity, feminism, sexuality, politics, and co-ed living. Next slide. No, back. Yeah, sorry, I looked at the wrong side of this thing. So who writes history and who cares? In 2019, one of the library librarians who is here today, Sarah, informed me that the Radcliffe College archives contained virtually nothing about the lived experience of Radcliffe women, undergraduates, about their life for the second, and she said that was true for the second half of the 20th century. So my immediate reaction was, are you kidding? I was shocked. Today I realize I should not have been surprised. I now know that Radcliffe College and her students are almost entirely absent from Harvard's institutional memory. The lived experiences of Radcliffe women are underrepresented in the Harvard and Radcliffe archives. We are doing something about that. One historian who has highlighted these gaps in women's history and presence at Harvard is Laurel Thatcher Ulwick, University Professor Emerita at Harvard. Professor Ulwick wrote an article entitled Harvard's Womanless History that was featured in the Harvard Magazine of November-December 1999. That's the cover of it. Ulwick's message, seen on this slide, has provided a crucial framework for the project. History is limited not only by what we can know about the past, but by what we care to know. Womanless history has been a Harvard specialty, end quote. I am asking who writes history and who cares? I am here to say we care, and we are writing and recording our own history. Next slide, please. Let me introduce Evelyn Richmond, class of 1941. She was 99 when I interviewed her in 2020. On the left, my left, is it your left too? Yeah, that's her yearbook photo, and then she was the eldest alum for the 2019 commencement. She's fabulous. It was my first Zoom, and she had someone there helping her press the buttons. I pressed the buttons, and I realized 20 minutes into it, oh no, I forgot to press record. So I said, Evelyn, I forgot to press record. So you could see how close she is. She kind of leaned into the Zoom thing and said, all right, let's just start again. You know, it was great, yeah. And then after that, I put a sign up in front of me. You know, that was in the olden days before you knew about recording. Anyway, Evelyn is the only alumna we interviewed who had a totally separate education. And then the next slide, please. This photo is a capture from Evelyn's and my Zoom interview. And I wanted to admit that was before I knew I better clean up behind myself. And then I wanted you all to see, I don't know if you can see it, but see her Radcliffe ring? She wore that until the day she died. Yeah. She wore it proudly. She loved Radcliffe. She was a commuter. They had a whole little group of, they hung out together in Agassiz. And so you saw the ring, and she loved Radcliffe. And as far as she was concerned, she had a Harvard education. Quote, it's a long one. So, we got the identical education they got at Harvard. And then after this, and she was clear about it, and after this strong statement, she added with a sparkle in her eye, well, we used to joke about the fact that we had the same courses that they had at Harvard. We had the same professors giving them. They used to give their lecture at Harvard, walk across the Commons to Radcliffe, and give us the same lecture, except for the dirty jokes. And I said, oh, really? They did dirty jokes? She said, I don't know. We never knew, you know. So, the transition, there's going to be 2 more stories of joint education becoming the norm. But the transition to official joint education was bumpy, up and down at best, often discriminatory, and often excellent. We have lots of stories about this, and now I'm going to give you 2 more from the 40s. So next slide, thank you. Mimi Greenman Grosser, class of 1946. This photo is a capture of her from her Zoom in 2021. Mimi started college when the Harvard professors gave separate lectures, etc. Her sophomore year joint education began. Mimi said, we were very much aware of the fact that our status at Harvard was changing due to the war, that we actually were going to classes in Harvard Yard. And a lot of the faculty were pretty hostile to that idea. I mean, there were faculty members who were notorious for making the women feel uncomfortable in their classrooms. And as Susie knows, we have a lot of stories about that. And as you can read on the slides, she said, it was known which professors were nice to women students. We Radcliffe students let each other know, if you're taking so-and-so's class, watch out. And she added, it was just how it was. It never occurred to us we could do anything about it. And in fact, at that point, we probably couldn't. We heard this refrain from many women. It was just how it was. And slide 10, next slide. And I'm happy to say, did you do, there, yeah, you did, there it is, that we have Edith Landauer-Litt's son here with us today. And I hope she's able to watch it on Zoom, but if not, there will be a recording. She was age 95 when she was interviewed just 3 months ago by Deborah Johnson, class of 71. This photo is from their Zoom. Here is a quote from her interview, and it's a feeling I imagine many of you can relate to her enthusiasm. I certainly can. Every course I took, I loved. I changed my major every term because there was a course I loved so much that I wanted to major in it forever. I loved the learning there. I just loved it. So, first it was going to be math, then government, and then it was sociology, and then anthropology. I ended up in the Harvard School of Design in my senior year, and that's another story that would not happen today. The dean interviewed me, and he said to me, you realize that you'll be taking a man's place. I agreed that I was, but I just felt I wanted to be me, and I wanted to do what I could do. Yay. So those are the 3, the arc of the joint education. She had it all the whole time and had things like this. Okay, let's talk libraries. I wonder how many of you know about the Radcliffe Reading Room in Widener. Do many of you know about it? Oh my God, okay. The original Widener, dedicated in 1915, had 1 room for Radcliffe students. The room was barely large enough for a single table. Evelyn Richmond said it was the only place they could be in Widener. And why was the room built? The room was built so it would not distract, quote, studious Harvard men. By the 1940s, Radcliffe students were allowed in the main reading room only if they stood. And I even read somewhere that they could only be in one section of it, but that data needs to be researched more carefully. Next slide, please. Linda Pastan from the class of 1954, I should say this is about Lamont Library, sorry. Linda knew from the time she arrived at Radcliffe that she wanted to be a poet. She won the Mademoiselle Poetry competition her senior year, competing against, among others, Sylvia Plath, who came in second. Linda went on to become a published poet of many books of poetry and the poet laureate of Maryland. She talked about her frustration at being excluded from Lamont. And this audio we're about to play is from her interview with Susie Underwood. Okay, please play the audio.
All right, so
That's
what
Susie.
would you say were the best and worst of the Radcliffe experience in the years you were there?
Yeah, I was so interested in poetry, and the Lamont Library had a poetry room, and you could listen to poems, and we weren't allowed to use it. And I tried to argue my way into it, and I couldn't, and that was really hard, not to be able to. Most of the men weren't interested in listening to the poetry. The room was empty, and I couldn't go in and listen. That was the worst, I think.
And what was the best?
The best was listening to I.A. Richards read Shakespeare. It really, I loved my courses, yeah.
So if you had the opportunity to go back in time and talk to yourself as an undergraduate, what would you want to say to that person?
I said, let's organize these women and say, no more of these parietal rules, no more of not being allowed into Lamont. Give us our freedom, protest, don't just give in without thinking that it was wrong. I look at my younger self in amazement at how I accepted all that. But as I said, it wasn't all Radcliffe's fault, it was the 50s.
Yeah, it was the 50s. Okay, next slide. I'll say a little, then you come up, yeah. So this is the flash mob. Oops, the flash mob. Class of 53, any 53ers here? No? Okay. Well, they, at their 50th reunion in 2003, for their 50th, they arranged to have a cocktail party in Lamont, but once they got inside, they turned it into a flash mob, singing the Radcliffe Revolution song, which had won the annual song competition at Radcliffe in 1951, and I imagine a lot of the 50s women know about this. I first heard about this song from Winnie Blacklow, class of 58. Winnie, I hope you're watching. I interviewed her in 2020. I asked her to sing it for me, and she has given me permission to share that moment, although she said I had to consult with her agent first. So let's play that. That's first we'll listen to Winnie. Okay, that's the top one. Yeah.
You had the verse that said there will be a ladies' restroom in the basement of Lamont when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. We will put Dean Kirby Miller into Massachusetts Hall. We will put Dean Kirby Miller into Massachusetts Hall. We will put Dean Kirby Miller into Massachusetts Hall when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. Harvard then will be the annex. I love that song. It won the song contest a few years before I arrived, but we sang it every year.
All right, winning. Thank you. But we are going to hear the second audio in a minute because Susie, our singer, will come up here and lead us. I want to just say the annex, I don't know, how many of you know about the annex? All right. The annex was essentially a program for the instruction of women by Harvard faculty and was founded in 1879 after a prolonged efforts by women to gain access to Harvard College. And 15 years later, the annex was certified by the state of Massachusetts and became Radcliffe College. Dean Kirby Miller was a well-liked Radcliffe dean, and then the song has her have an office in Massachusetts Hall. And there's a verse about jolly-ups. Their social dances at Radcliffe will now be at Dunster. So Susie will lead us in the song, and I think we all can sing along.
Yes, we haven't printed the words for you, but since everything is repeated 3 times, I think you'll catch on pretty quickly. And the first verse is that we'll have a ladies' restroom in the basement of Lamont, which was, since women weren't allowed in Lamont at all, the idea of putting a restroom there was revolutionary. So I'm going to step away from the mic.
We'll have a ladies' restroom in the basement of Lamont. We'll have a ladies' restroom in the basement of Lamont. We'll have a ladies' restroom in the basement of Lamont when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. We'll stage all of our jolly-ups in Dunster's common room. We'll stage all of our jolly-ups in Dunster's common room. We'll stage all of our jolly-ups in Dunster's common room when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. We'll put Dean Kirby Miller into Massachusetts Hall. We'll put Dean Kirby Miller into Massachusetts Hall. We'll put Dean Kirby Miller into Massachusetts Hall when the Radcliffe Revolution comes. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex. Harvard then will be the annex when the Radcliffe Revolution comes.
Yay, Susie. I interviewed 2 of the women who were in there. One way on the, you're there, and one there. And AC Welch is on Zoom, I hope. And hi, AC. She was one of the women. Okay, moving along. Oops, you will, nope, one back. Okay, more changes later in the 50s and the 60s. So separate Radcliffe activities slowly began to disappear in the 50s. To name a few of them, Radcliffe had a separate radio station, a newspaper, a yearbook, an annual song contest and show, and debate team, like the Radcliffe Revolution song won in '51, and they sang it all every year. And the transition to joint activities was, you already know what I'm going to say, bumpy, up and down at best, often discriminatory, and often rewarding. A joint extracurricular story I want to tell is from Sally Bingham, class of 1958. She wanted to join the Harvard Advocate Board. I'm going to be quoting a lot of what she said from her interview with Connie Gibb. You went and sat in the advocate office at a long table. It was dark, and they had a sort of spotlight on you at the end of the table. They began to fire these incredibly difficult questions to you about a book. She remembered it was The Wasteland. And I was just not able to cope with it all. I remember finally just really breaking down crying. And needless to say, I did not get on the board. Later, I learned that was probably fortunate, because what the Radcliffe girls on the board did was clean the bathroom. Yeah. Okay, what about the 60s? There's so much to say, of course, about each decade, and last Alumni Day, we did an entire Zoom about the 60s and early 70s that HAA can send you. But for today, I'm just going to say one observation. So I am here to tell you, many alumni from every class in the 1960s have expressed to me with absolute certainty, quote, my class is the turning point class at Radcliffe. So now my response, you are correct. Every class in the 1960s is a turning point class. It was, after all, the 60s. Okay, now next slide, diversity. So many, I'm focusing on the 40s, 50s, and very early 60s. There were very few women of color, often one or two per class of 300. Many of the women in these years spoke about Radcliffe introducing them to people different from different backgrounds, but to them that meant public or private school, different religions, commuter or dorm. There were many commuters, and I still don't know the exact year that there became more women that lived on campus than were commuters. And where they grew up, different concentrations. And looking back, they all realized how unaware they were about the lack of racial and ethnic diversity and inclusion. And let's hear from Pamela Blake McLean, class of 1964. Connie Gibb, her interviewers asked, as the only African American in your class, what was that like? You know, I was lucky in the sense that my arrival predated affirmative action, so I didn't have that suitcase to carry. I am sure that others saw me as a diversity, but there was only one of me, so I obviously was prepared to be there, and my presence hadn't displaced a lot of other people. What about women faculty? I expected that there would be more women. I was astounded that there were almost none. So I called and asked Pamela, why did she think she both noticed and was bothered by the lack of women professors? Because many women in the early 60s did not mention this at all about noticing and being upset about it. Here's what Pamela said. I probably noticed the lack of women professors and black people because by both gender and race, I had no role models at Harvard. I did not expect that. And then she added, as you can see on the slide, outsiders have to be aware of insiders in order to survive. The reverse is not true. So, next slide. Here is Linda Greenhouse. That's a register picture, class of 1968, commenting in retrospect about feminist awareness. Okay, the audio.
Wow, what we put up with as, not to be blunt about it, but second-class citizens at Harvard. Why did we put up with that? And we did because, we thought we were kind of special enough to be at Radcliffe, and we just didn't have the language to articulate to ourselves how underserved we were by the greater Harvard community, not by Radcliffe per se, but by Mother Harvard.
So okay. So now to Susie, and of course, please do the next slide. Her register picture is a must-see. Okay, Susie.
Thank you for digging out my register picture. That was me at 16. So I'm going to tell you about phase 2 of our project, which started with the class of 63. But first, I just want to speak to 2 points that Alice made. I'm sure you all loved, as I did, seeing the photo of Evelyn Richmond, class of 41, wearing her Radcliffe ring. So I must show you that I am also wearing my Radcliffe ring that I've been wearing for over 50 years. I don't know, you probably can't really see it, but I treasure it. And then secondly, while Alice said that every class of the 60s was the turning point class, I maintain that my class, the class of 72, is the true turning point class. Halfway in the 60s and halfway in the 70s. When we arrived in September 1968, everything was much as it had been throughout the 60s. We had sherry hours and gracious living. We were required to wear skirts to class and to dinner. Men were only allowed upstairs in the dorm during limited hours. We had to sign out in the evenings and be back by curfew. And of course, we had those bells, wait-ons, and jolly-ups, which you will hear about in a minute. This all changed with the arrival of co-ed dorms in 1970. So let's hear it for class of 72. I know there are a bunch of you here. Okay, next slide. In phase 2, we recruited some younger interviewers from the 2000s who are here today and discovered that there were several terms in the questionnaire that they were not familiar with. And this turned out to be true even with an interviewer from 1975, because things had changed so rapidly after the dorms became co-ed. So I created a glossary containing these 4 key terms. As you can see from the slide, I included a definition of parietals and a pronunciation guide for that word, because they had no idea. The bell's desk, wait-ons, and jolly-ups. My definitions were actually much more detailed than what we put on the slide, especially for the bell's desk, which was the nerve center of the dorm. Some of you here today will probably not know these terms. All of them were an essential part of the Radcliffe experience until the early 70s, but completely forgotten afterwards. Next slide, I think. Oh, back to me. We found that we needed to make some changes in the interview questionnaire between phase 1 and phase 2, although we wanted to keep the questions as much the same as possible. The 3 areas where our questions changed significantly were sexuality, politics, and co-ed living. The first change was a new series of questions about sexuality. While some women in phase 1 brought the topic up on their own, it was often in the context of saying that they got married during college so that they could have sex. But most didn't mention it at all. And we felt uncomfortable asking these women from the 40s and 50s, who were in their 80s and 90s, for details about sex. In phase 2, since we knew that the 1960s brought the sexual revolution and the availability of the pill, we decided to face it head on. We wanted to know what were our interviewees' attitudes about sex when they arrived at Radcliffe, and whether those attitudes changed by the time they graduated. Next slide, please. Carol Potter, from the class of 70, described very clearly the transition that many of us saw either between high school and college or during the years of college. She said, "When I was in high school, you were supposed to say no. But once the sexual revolution came along, you were supposed to say yes." And there was very little discussion about, well, how do you make a decision about who you want to have sex with, who you don't want to have sex with? What role does it play in a relationship? None of the nuance. The old epithet was slut, and the new epithet was ice queen or prude. So to me, it was just a flip. It also flipped the expectations of the boys. Now they all thought, when they went out on a date, that they were entitled to have sex. So that was her experience, and I think many interviewees had similar experiences. I know I did. Next slide. Politics became increasingly important towards the end of the 60s. From the very beginning of the project, we had a question about politics, which was just, did you participate in any political activities during college? The phase 1 women generally said no. In phase 2, the story has been very different, with increasing levels of political activity as the years progressed. For those in the classes of 69 through 72, we added specific questions about the April 69 occupation of University Hall, the meeting in Harvard Stadium a few days later, which is shown in the picture on the left. And by the way, Rachel Ritvo, who is in that photo, is here today with her striped shirt on. And the student strikes that occurred in both 1969 and 1970. Whoops, I've done something here. But it doesn't show up there, that's good. Kathy Kaufer Christoffel, class of 69, was chosen by her classmates to give the commencement speech at the last separate Radcliffe graduation in 1969. And she had this to say about the anti-war, anti-ROTC movement at Harvard Radcliffe. "I learned so much through that. I learned how society worked. I learned how you build a movement. I learned about different political philosophies and how they could or could not work together. I saw different styles of leadership. I saw the misogyny of the men in the movement. I learned at least as much through my political education at Harvard as I did through my classes." Okay, next slide. Something's going on here. I'm sorry, I think I hit something.
Oh, we're all good. Sorry.
Oh, okay, all right. Protests for equal admission of women occurred at graduation in 1971, 72, and 73. So we have questions for those classes about that. The Graduate School of Design, which had silkscreen posters and t-shirts for the earlier strikes, made the design you see on the slide, and many women wore these pieces of fabric pinned to the back of their graduation gowns. It's too bad we don't have a color photo, because that design of the woman symbol, the fist, and the equal sign was in bright red.
I have one from an armband from 1974.
An armband from 74 that just had an equal sign on it? Okay. Next slide. For the classes of the 70s, we have also added questions about co-ed living. This was the dramatic change that separated the college experience of the 60s from that of the 70s. And as some of you may not know the history, the integration of the houses started as an experiment in the spring of 1970 with an exchange between the 3 Radcliffe houses, then known as North, South, and East, and 3 of the Harvard houses, Winthrop, Adams, and Lowell. A total of 150 men traded places with 150 women. The next year, 2 more Harvard houses joined, Quincy and Dunster, and more people swapped. Finally, in 71-72, all the houses were included, and there was no longer any single-sex housing to be found. We are asking women whether they chose to move down to Harvard or stay at Radcliffe, and why. We are also asking them what they thought was gained and what was lost by making all the dorms co-ed. Reactions to the experiment varied. Nancy Marquis, 72, who was already living in her boyfriend's Adams House suite when the house was all male, chose not to move down officially when she could have. When I asked why she didn't, she said, "I found that whole thing disgusting. We called it sprinkling Cliffies among the houses. It was like all the Harvard boys wanted some Cliffies, so they all got a few. I'd been there, done that, just really inexcusably callous." On the other hand, Debbie Smulyan, who is here today, I think, somewhere, did move down and loved living in Winthrop House. She told her interviewer, "That first semester, it was like a big party. Most of the boys were so happy to have us there, and there were so damned many of them. The dining hall was a party every single meal. We would just go sit and eat and laugh and talk and change tables and sit with other people. I mean, it was like being at somebody's bar mitzvah." Many of the interviewees stated that in retrospect, they regret losing the community of women that they had at an all-female Radcliffe. But others said it was the right thing to do, especially because the men's housing was nicer and also so much more convenient to classes. Most of the women I have talked to expressed the opinion that, for better or worse, the integration of the houses was the biggest reason for the eventual demise of Radcliffe. Here's what one 72er said in response to the question, "What were your feelings and reactions as Radcliffe merged and disappeared?" "Well, I was sad, but it was like getting married. Why does the woman change her name? I never changed my name. Most of my friends never changed theirs. Why did Radcliffe have to disappear? Why couldn't the women of Harvard still be called Radcliffe?" So I was sad about that. But I also felt that in a way, by us, my class and the classes around us, protesting and demanding co-ed housing and also equal admissions probably caused this to happen. You know, if we had been nice little girls who were happy with just having 300 in a class and just living up at the Radcliffe Quad, we probably could have kept the Radcliffe identity. But once we wanted more women and better housing, we may have signed our own death warrant. I see Alice, who was my interviewer, looking at me quizzically, as if to say, "Wasn't that you who said that in your interview, Susie?" And my answer is, yes, I'm quoting myself. Okay, and now back to Alice.
Okay, yes, Susie, got ya. Okay. So in conclusion for these slides, please go to the next one. Finally today, let's hear from Jill Neeram, class of 1960, interviewed by Diane Franklin, who's here today, class of 66. Jill was a strong advocate for the project. She would call me up and she would have all these ideas, and I go, oh my God, really, really, really? Should we do that? Should we do that? She sadly died in 2022, and her husband, Bill Bell, is here today with us. And please play the audio.
Well, I've cast aspersions at Radcliffe in different ways, so I guess I'd like to wind up by saying thank you, Radcliffe. It was a good experience. It was the most exciting world to be in. It was really quite a privilege.
So today we are celebrating the spirit of Radcliffe, reconnecting with each other, speaking, recording, and writing our lived experience of undergraduate life. I think we all can agree with Minna Schrag, class of 1962, who said to me, "This project is a necessity." Next slide. So as the director of the Radcliffe College Alumni Oral History Project, I am honored to present our interviews to the Radcliffe College Archives at the Schlesinger Library. And as an alumna of Radcliffe College, I celebrate our shared history. I am so grateful that Patrina Jackson, the executive director of the Schlesinger Library, has agreed to speak. Among her many interests, she is a strong advocate for archiving underrepresented voices. Thank you, Patrina.
Thank you, Alice. Good afternoon. I'm Patrina Jackson, Leah Jelen-Pourview, Executive Director of the Schlesinger Library at Radcliffe Institute. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today and to be a part of this special presentation and celebration. On behalf of the Radcliffe Institute and the Schlesinger Library, I want to express our deepest gratitude to Alice for her leadership of the Radcliffe Oral History Project. Alice, your passion, your commitment, and advocacy for this work has been extraordinary. I would also like to thank the volunteer interviewers whose time and dedication fueled this project, the project participants for sharing their remarkable histories and experiences, and the Radcliffe Club of San Francisco, and the many donors whose support of Alice and her team have made the project possible. Lastly, I would like to thank Jenny Gottwells, the Johanna Marie Frankel Curator for Gender and Society at the Schlesinger Library, who has been the primary liaison between this volunteer effort and the Schlesinger to ensure the histories are appropriately cared for, processed, and archived. As you all know, the Radcliffe Institute traces its origins to Radcliffe College, founded to give women access to a Harvard education at a time when the university would not admit them. Today's institute carries that legacy forward in our enduring commitment to women in the study of gender, as well as our dedication to advancing opportunity for all, and to fostering the exchange of ideas across different disciplines, different perspectives, different life experiences. At the Schlesinger, which is the leading center for scholarship on the history of women in the United States, we have an unwavering commitment to ensuring that our archives reflect a more complete history of the American women's lives. As such, we remain focused on expanding our collections to represent groups who have been excluded or marginalized throughout history. The Schlesinger is proud to hold the Radcliffe College archives, which illuminate over a century of Radcliffe College history, including how the college and its students responded to and shaped important social movements and other historical events. And we are committed to making these invaluable records more accessible and visible to future scholars and students. The Oral History Project is integral to enriching and expanding our understanding of Radcliffe College's history by recording the undergraduate experiences of our alumni. In addition, this effort has also inspired 15 Radcliffe College alumni classes to record their histories in written form, from which are also being donated to the Schlesinger. We are so fortunate to have these histories as part of the Schlesinger's collection, living alongside the Radcliffe College archives. Together, they will provide future generations of scholars with a more complete historical record of Radcliffe College and its students, and help advance our commitment to preserving Radcliffe's enduring legacy. Thank you again, Alice, for catalyzing this work, and thank you to all who have contributed to this effort. We are grateful and we are honored to be the beneficiary and stewards of these important histories. I'd now like to invite Susie back to the stage.
All right, we will be closing the program with two more songs, but you will get the words to these songs. You got the first one up, yeah. The first one is the Radcliffe fight song. Now, I've heard that some people didn't even know that Radcliffe had a fight song. But anybody who was in choral society knows that we always sang the fight song. And then after that, we'll have the alma mater. So the words are going to be up there. You'll hear, the recording is members of the 2018 Radcliffe Choral Society doing a concert in Portola Valley, California that year, and they invited the alumni who were in the audience to come up and sing the fight song in the alma mater. So I'm on this recording too. Although I hope you can't hear my distinctive voice. Okay, so everybody sing along. You ready? R-A-D-C-L-I-F-E, oh, Radcliffe, members assemble, we'll always give the homage true. Oh, we are thy daughters loyal, in all that thou wouldst have us do. Rah, 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 we sing our banners proudly, we hoist our emblems to the skies. We cheer our alma mater, we cheer our college great and wise. Fight! All right, so for the alma mater, I would ask you, if you are able, to please stand.
I'm going to just come up.
Okay, sure.
It's just good because it's the end.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Radcliffe, now we rise to greet thee, alma mater, hail to thee. All our hearts are one.
thank you all for joining us. Do you want to sing it again?
No, say it again.
Oh, thank you all for joining us. And now let's party and celebrate.